We're now ready to cut the boards for the cover, and I've cut this board already at a right angle, and I know it's a right angle because I've been able to measure it on the squares on my cutting mat. If you haven't got a large cutting mat with lines on it giving you the right angles, it's a very useful thing to have, especially the big ones, and you can work on them and use them when you need them. So I've cut that at a right angle, and I now need to make sure that I have the correct square. That's the distance between the top of the book and the edge of the board. And on a book this size it doesn't want to be too much. That's about 1/8 of an inch, slightly less perhaps. You don't want it right down there because you don't have enough leeway, and you don't want it up here because it looks clumsy. So it wants to be a sort of just whatever looks right. The board needs to sit comfortably in the joint, the shoulder here that you've just made with the rounding and backing process. So with the board sitting comfortably there, I just need to make a mark here where the forage square will come, and again down at the bottom where the other end of the board will be. It's a good idea to turn the whole book round and check that it's exactly the same on the other side. Sometimes books can be rather irregular, and you may find that you have to make the square a little bit longer for, or a little bit wider rather. Sometimes books, old books especially, will come forward at the forage, and so you need to make sure that you have got the whole bit covered. Sometimes you might need to take the board right back on one side so that it's right on the other, but I think for this one I seem to be fitting in quite well, so I think I'll leave those as the guidelines. Quite a good idea to draw the lines, again using the squares on this cutting mat. So if I've got my right angle in exactly up this corner, I can then put the ruler down on the marks I've got, and just checking that it's correct top and bottom, I can just draw a straight line down which I can then follow, and the same with the line at the other end. So that is correct there, and those will be my cutting lines. I have a board chopper which I shall use, but it's perfectly right to use a knife and a straight edge. If you do, make sure it's a good solid straight edge. One of these is preferable, and if you lay it down there, use one of these solid cutting knives. Don't use a scalpel, it's much too dangerous on boards. You're likely to break it and the thing flies off into your face, which you don't want. So as you're cutting, keep your knife absolutely flat, straight rather, keep it flat against the straight edge and cut down. Don't angle it off at odd directions. It's very difficult to get a straight edge if you do that. So you will just need to cut several times. I always use millboard for pretty well everything except boxes. Grey board is much softer, easier to cut, but if you want your binding to last any time, millboard is much better. Certainly for leather bindings, you really don't want to be using grey board on those. It's just not good enough. For case binding you can use grey board if you want to, but as I say, I prefer to use millboard. And I'm not going to go on doing that, but you get the idea. You just have to plug on until you get to the end. And I'm going to cut the other board to exactly the same shape and size. I've already got the right angle measured and marked, so when I cut I just need to make sure they are absolutely exact, exactly the same. And on the board shop, of course, that's fairly easy because you can use the side gauge. When you've got your boards cut and you reckon they're fairly square, you can check them by putting them against each other and stand them up and see that they're level all along there. Mine are pretty good. If you're not sure, or even if you are sure, turn one of them round. Just one of them, and check them again. If they then look like that, you know perfectly well that they're both wrong in the same direction. So it's as well just to check the square corners. I'm going to check the up and down measurements as well. They look fine. If they are slightly wrong, and I can see in fact there's a bit of a bulge there, that I will take off with a sander and I will just sand that square. So you can do quite a lot of tweaking just to make things square and straight as you can. I think one looks slightly, very fractionally wider than the other, so I might just take a whisker off that side edge, but anyway, I'm going to get them square now. When you've got your boards cut and you're satisfied they're completely square, I've checked mine several times, and it's worth getting it right because it does matter. I'm then going to put them on the book rather, and make sure that they are going to fit properly. So that's quite a nice square. I can see each end. That's fine, and put the book on there. So that's fine. So I've got them the right size and they're absolutely square. So I'm now going to take a piece of book cloth and we're going to make up the case.